Grassy Knoll on AM 1610 WDCX, and you can hear this also streaming on remnantradio.org and also pascoradio.org. And we have with us today, Lady Viz is telling me to speak up, and I'll do that. Okay, my headphones are so loud. Okay, it sounds like I'm yelling. Okay, again we have with us for our fifth segment Andrew Colvin. He is the documentary filmmaker. The title is The Mothman's Photographer. And we've talked about a lot in the 4 hours that we've had. And to me, this is ever so more labyrinthine than the Kennedy assassination and all the personages involved in that. And even what we're talking about also relates to the Kennedy assassination. I mean, it's almost like a Kevin Bacon thing. All roads lead to that. And Andrew, first of all, thank you for coming back to the Grassy Knoll. I appreciate the time you spent with us.
Thank you, Viz.
All right, and I'm going to say also something, okay, and take it for what it's worth. You know, once upon a time, Andrew, I wanted to get on the show like all the guests that everybody else had on, and I said to myself, that's nice that you're running with the dogs, but what are you getting done? Now, take this, understand what I'm saying here. So what I started to look for are people that have not been necessarily heard and should be heard and should have a greater venue. And I started looking for people who haven't been talked about all that much. And you might say, well, that's easy for you to get guests on. I'm saying, okay, that's fine. But they're very worthy, and they don't have a stage necessarily. And so when you wrote to me about wanting to get to Lavenda, and that's another whole story, I don't know necessarily you were fishing to come on, but I mean, I certainly said, listen, why don't you come on? And you said, okay. And here's the thing. I didn't have you on because, I don't know, that you had some strange story that should be on Coast to Coast, but because I really do believe you hit on something which I have always thought was out there, and that is the activity not only around the Mothman, but in that whole area of West Virginia. So what I'm saying is this. I'm glad you came on, and I hope you go on and on and on in other shows and stay to the veracity with which you've portrayed the other 4 segments. I mean, stay true to that. I think you will. I mean, that's up to you. But, I mean, I'm very glad you're here. And, I mean, if you cut your teeth on our show and go on some other place and polish it and get more business, then that's good. I think that's really important, and I hope you do that. But I'm glad you're here. I'm glad we had the time that we did. And if we don't do any more beyond these 5 hours, I wouldn't consider myself cheated or the audience whatsoever. So whatever happens, good. And I'm glad you're on, and we worked through this kind of, like I said, labyrinthine situation. And I mean, even you need your notes, and I think it's a great learning experience for both of us. And I think that the audience appreciates the honesty and basically, connecting the dots along with you. So I hope that you feel, and I think you feel more comfortable as time goes on, and I hope that you're glad that you spent the time with us.
Oh yeah, I have. It's been great.
Yeah, whatever happens afterward, that's fine. But I think you've been legitimate, and I think you have a great story. My God, I mean, this thing could be, 17 volumes the way things are going, and you would admit the same as well. So, anyway, be that as it may, I'm off my soapbox. Things are cool. We're back to normal again. And what I want you to do is, you got a couple of, bullet points you want to speak to, some errata that you might want to speak to, so it's all yours, Andrew.
Yeah, thanks. Well, there's a noise there.
There's always a noise.
Did you hear that?
Nope, I didn't hear it. It's on your end.
Good. It blew my ears out.
It's the NSA listening on your end, brother, not mine.
Yeah, it's these research companies that tend to call while I'm on the phone with you. I'm serious. It's happened like 3 times now.
Well, give me my number and we'll talk amongst ourselves. All right, bro. Go ahead.
Well, I wanted to start off with a shout out. I haven't done any of that, but I want to in this case because, especially for my grandniece who just had surgery, and she's a big a budding young Mothman investigator. And her name's Ariane Moore, and she's in West Virginia, and she was actually in the hospital where the miner is, the guy that's in the coma.
Yeah.
Referring back to that earlier discussion we had about the miners.
Oh, and by the way, I hate to admit this, but since we've been, even in the few weeks or the few days that we've done this, there was a third, wasn't there, in West Virginia? There were 3. Remember we were wondering if the shoe would drop?
Oh, right.
Yeah, okay. I mean, be that as it may, but it certainly happened a third son. But go ahead.
Did I say great niece or grandniece? I don't know what I said, but she's my niece's daughter, and my niece is Sharon, and Sharon's Sharon Moore, and she's in the video. She saw Mothman in her bedroom, and also, and that was around 911 time. And then she also saw a satyr at one time. Around the same time in '74 that I was talking about before, she saw these things. She saw the satyr, and no, the satyr was was around 911 as well. But she saw these glowing numbers in her room that were very similar to what Philip K. Dick had seen. And by the way, I mentioned Lily when I was talking about Dick before, John Lilly, because I know someone who studied with Lily, and I've got some more on Lily that I want to go into later. But Sharon and Ariane helped me when I go back and film. They're my crew, and they help with product sales and so forth at the Mothman Festival. So I wanted to thank them. And it made me just a little point about hospital care. Now, since we're on that subject, there's a lot of cancer of the country in West Virginia, and then obviously it has something to do with all the toxins that are coming out of these chemical plants. Got players there: Dow, Monsanto, FMC, Rhone, Poulenc, Bayer, Union Carbide, DuPont, who, by the way, DuPont owns the TNT area, or at least they were the ones operating it during the time when it was making they were making TNT there. And that's the same company where we had these men bursting into flames and disappearing.
By the way, did you ever hear, just as a little sidebar, there was a book written about DuPont called Behind, I think, the Nylon Curtain, and it actually got a mainstream publisher to bring it, to publish it, and then all of a sudden it was what they call privished. By the way, Andrew, in other words, the publisher went ahead with it, but they did no PR, nothing. In other words, they published the thing and let it die. And so that you mentioned DuPont, I just want to say that there was an expose on them that was ready to go and was absolutely eviscerated. And you can read about that story in the book Into the Buzzsaw, that's edited by Christina Borgeson. And so about this whole DuPont situation, they're another player that was going to be exposed, and they crushed that particular book. And I'm sorry, but please go on.
Well, I have another witness in the video who worked for DuPont for 30 years, and she saw a UFO. She's married to my brother.
That's a good source.
And they both saw a large UFO out in Delaware, where they live. But the scandal, I think, or the way they keep the lid on all the cancer is through the insurance companies. And it just dawned on me actually today. This is what's going on, because at one time in my life, when I was deciding where to go to college, I knew a couple of the big players in the insurance, a couple of families that were in the insurance business, and I went to a meeting at the country club. I was kind of from the wrong side of the tracks, but I also had friends who, went to the country club and so forth, because I was in the accelerated classes at school. And I remember a meeting. It was like a fraternity preparatory meeting for guys who were going to one of the big universities in the state. And it was sort of it was kind of a deal like, if you decide to do this, we're giving you this opportunity, you'll be set for life. It was kind of that kind of a thing. And I remember standing there thinking, well, this is my point in life where I make a decision. Do I want to stay here and go with these guys and have, be a big fish in a small pond, or do I want to go out and see the world? So I made that decision to go off. But it was an insurance guy that was sort of the leader of this whole thing, and we recently had a big problem in West Virginia with doctors and insurance, right? And a lot of I think they even went on strike, if I recall correctly. I didn't do a lot of research on it, but I remember it was a big story back when the malpractice rates shot up. Do you remember that?
Oh yeah, yeah, sure.
And doctors were moving out of West Virginia to neighboring states. A little sidebar, by the way, is I have a relative who was studying to be a doctor who decided to go into Virginia to study across the border because it was so much better. And one of the stories he told me was that this is unsubstantiated, but this is a guy I know and trust. He's a religious fellow even. He said that one of the guys he went to school with, his dad was in the CIA, and they had he borrowed from his dad this disc that you can put into any, it was like a floppy disk or whatever. You can stick it into any computer, and you can change whatever information you want in any computer, and it will leave no trace. And I think there was some joke made about them changing the grades or something in the school computer. I don't know if it was really a joke or not.
I'll go for that.
That's just a little sidebar. But I think what they did is, in West Virginia particularly, they really put the pressure on the doctors through the insurance companies, and I'll bet you that it's tied to whether or not the doctors are playing ball with the chemical companies.
Mm-hmm.
I really think that that's kind of where it all comes together. Is when you get in, if your father's dying of cancer, you don't really get any support for getting to the bottom of why he has it. If he works at one of these companies, you get the stonewalled pretty much. And the doctors, it wouldn't happen unless the doctors, went along with it. And this is how they're made to go along with it. I think is they're probably given sweetheart deals on the insurance. If they play ball. But
I had a good friend that was a doctor, and back in the 80s, he just said to me, he said, listen, we meaning the doctors, the good old GPs, the guys we trust, like Marcus Welby, he was saying, we want to see something different also. But, our voices are just so loud as well. You can't, no matter what you raise up, it is very, very difficult to, beat at the bastion of the pharmaceutical, medical, hospital complex. You know what I mean? And so you do have voices of reason out there, but unless they also want to fall on the stakes themselves, they'll find themselves probably howling at the moon and nothing more. So, I agree with you 100%, and I do believe there's a lot of physicians out there who want to do it the way it should be, but they're just so obstructed that it's let's be honest, it's not going to happen.
Well, yeah, the pharmaceuticals are an outgrowth of the oil company.
There you go. And we talked about that day one. It's such an ironic thing.
And the Nazi flight capital that came out after the war, a lot of that went into pharmaceuticals, and they're now putting the pressure on the doctors as well. But I think, getting back to the miners for just a second, I think when you have these mine explosions and all this focus goes toward the miners, it really misleads people in a way. There's no doubt that mining is a gutsy profession, and these guys do die of lung cancer, black lung.
Yeah, it's very hazardous, no doubt.
But I think it obscures the huge other thing that's going on there, which is these people who are dying from working in these chemical plants. The West Virginia chemical workers should be the one who the rest of the world sees, not or is given at least equal time, because these people are working in just really difficult situations. I have a cousin who works with the Bhopal India gas, the same gas that killed everyone in Bhopal. She actually handles this stuff through a glass, in her
enclosure,
with the robot arms or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
And there's no doubt that there's a super high cancer rate there. So just trying to, I'd like to bring a little more awareness to that in any way that I can.
And let me ask you this one question, and we'll go on to your train of thought. But at this point, since we've in some approximate time period with this situation with three problems in West Virginia, There was one in Canada. Are you aware of that? Right up in Manitoba, where there was a caving in, but they came out okay. But the whole thing is this: it's like all of a sudden, everything under the hill is, we're going to make this legislation and we're going to do this and do that. Look, the legislation is already there. Whoever the mine companies were didn't abide by it anyway. So you can make all the laws you want in the world. They didn't do it. And anybody who wants to blow a whistle will be told, if you don't like it, guess what? You don't have a job. Would you agree with that?
Oh, in terms of the mine conditions?
Well, yeah, you can have all the laws in place, but we all know the way things really work, and that is, shut up if you want a job.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's so many bloody, historical battles and things that have occurred in the coal fields.
Sure.
So.
This is nothing new, and nothing's really changed. They can make all the laws they want in the world, but if they don't enforce them, it doesn't mean jack.
Yeah, it did seem to be a diversion of sorts. It was just, I mean, and my heart goes out to the families.
Absolutely.
I think the media, made use of it to sort of divert from some of the other things that were going on. And then you see someone like, you see Coretta Scott King die, and then you see Bush there, giving,
Yeah.
I mean, it's great that he's paying respect and everything, but then you look at some of the things that were done to Martin Luther King, and I do want to touch on him a little bit later.
Okay.
But that's kind of a hypocrisy that.
Hypocrisy is us. U.S.
There's a lot of diversions that go on.
Oh, sure, without a doubt.
But while we're on the subject of the chemical plants, one little detail about the ART CIA angle is, actually I don't know that it has so much to do with the CIA, but it definitely has to do with ART, is that once Union Carbide merged with Dow, suddenly you have a woman the woman who owns a huge chunk of Dow is a big art maven on the West Coast. She's D.D. Wilsey, and she runs San Francisco, or the art world there, pretty much. And I mentioned her because she's been such a high-profile person recently, especially since her son wrote a book about his life with her. And it really paints an unflattering picture of this woman who's a chemical heiress who, I mean, I guess I recently got the book. I haven't read it yet, but it's something, most of the time we think of art people being, I don't know, having the sensibilities of environmental sensibilities or whatever, but no, I mean, in reality, it's, the people that own these chemical companies are running the art world. I don't think people realize that.
No, they don't.
Something that I've run up against constantly in my career. I mean, it is unbelievable the amount of rigidity that's brought to bear on the artists, because the artists are they need the most controlling, if you will, because they're flying around, off the handle sometimes, really exposing things and doing art about it, and so they really put the hammer down on you when you do that. Mm-hmm. I've had so many negative experiences with the quote official art world.
But Andrew, I would say this: that a lot of the foundations are the ones who underwrite artistic works, literarily, art-wise, whatever, performance and such. But the thing is, that's why every time I look at PBS, I'm like, well, why don't you contribute to PBS? And I'm going, why? Because the Carnegie Foundations, the Rockefeller Foundations, the MacArthur Foundations are all pumping money in like crazy. And so these artists are, to a certain extent, would you agree, grabbed by the short hairs by these conglomerates, and they're not free.
Absolutely. They're not. They're not.
No.
It really came to bear in the 80s, which is when I was in grad school, and people may not believe this, but I dropped out with one class to go from getting my master's degree as a political protest, and I did art about it. I stated what it was I was doing, that it was political, and that's what I did. And at the time, I just felt like that's the right thing to do. I'm not, because they were cutting funding across the board. I mean, I lost my teaching assistantship.
Yeah, TA. Yep.
Because of Reagan.
Yep.
Reagan Bush put the hammer down as soon as I got reelected, and that was it. And I was furious, and it really, there was no, everyone went along with it.
Yep.
And I couldn't handle it anymore. And I thought it was even better that I was only three credits away, one class away, because that made it mean something. I mean, I think people understood that I was serious about it.
Andrew, not to get into my life, but I tell you what, I went halfway through a master's in journalism, an MS over in Ohio U, Athens, right? You know that. I mean, you know Athens, right? You know
Yeah.
Ohio U. Okay. And the thing is, I'm sitting there going, I had already worked for a newspaper, the Rutland Herald and a couple of other places, and going, this isn't journalism. This is like something about journalism. And I hated it. I absolutely hated the academia. And I left. So I understand exactly what you mean, because you know what? The reality and what you're being taught in graduate school is always, no, not sometimes, always two different things.
Well, I think what it did was it actually spurred me on to continue to work. I know so many people
right. Mm-hmm.
who got their degree who stopped doing art, but I always felt like I had something to prove from then on. So, and I've continued to do that now.
Well, good for you. Okay. That's
if you're interested in reading about this topic, I suggest people read Eugenia Macer's story, MACER/story, STORY.
All right, say it
She has
slowly.
several books on the art world. She bridges the occult, art, and UFOs.
All right, say that
slowly. Early UFO research. Are you familiar with her?
No, I'm not, but what I'm going to ask you to do is, because you went really quickly through that, her first and last name, or whatever it is you have to do to reference her on the URL or a dog pile search or Google, say it again, slowly.
Eugenia.
Spell
and her last name is two names, Macer Story, MACER-STORY.
Okay.
And her early books were on UFOs. She was a great UFO researcher, but she was also into magic and theater, and she's written several plays and ran a magic shop. But she has a lot of occultish things happening in her life, and she's developed this whole theory on that there are all these occultists out there who are trying to play tricks on you if you're either a UFO researcher or a political person. And this is similar to the kinds of stuff that was happening to John Keel, as happened to her as well. She's just been much more detailed in the way she documents it. It's just an amazing day-by-day rundown of the little things that happen that can't be coincidence. And she's even got some great photos of things. She takes photos of these people that follow her. People have tried to get her ensnared in different things, and she's always ready. She's just a great warrior, if you will, in this fight.
Okay.
And she's there. She's got some strange photos of paranormal things happening right in front of the camera, and it's just an amazing. Her whole body of work is really cool. One of the ideas she kept talking about was Yale University seemed to be the center of an art conspiracy, and I found this to be true in my experience. I had 3 different professors along the way who were from Yale, and they all gave me a hard time as soon as they found out what my thing was, that I was sort of into that realm. It just was so definite, and it was so. I just throw that out because that's where the Skull and Bones is from too.
Oh, I was going to follow up with that. It's like you can't find an institution more embedded with quasi-occult fraternities than Yale, with Skull and Bones and a number of them beyond that. You're right.
I can start jumping around here to just little points that I should have mentioned earlier.
Well, you said you wanted to discuss or address some errata from the last shows. Do you still want to do that?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, I mentioned DuPont and the TNT. Another thing was I mentioned a woman that had contacted me about a chair image that I had made.
That's right.
And how that related to my dad in Montauk. And then I'd gone to see her, and we had done this thing with the white bird at the anti-nuke rally. Well, we also had a weird encounter in the forest on that trip that I forgot about, that we talk about in the video, but it seemed to be a Bigfoot. and that was and we didn't see it, but there was something there, and it was invisible. That's the best way I can describe it. It was walking, it was banging sticks, and the hair stood up on our bodies, and we were just terrified, unbelievable. We were in Bear Mountain, which is in New York. But a lot of times you'll have these sightings.
Wait, hold on. I got to stop you, Andrew. You were up in Bear Mountain, New York?
We were traveling through to Massachusetts from New York and stopped there to camp.
And so this happened up in Hudson Valley, New York.
Yeah, my uncle lives in Peekskill, so we were kind of on our way to see him. He lives right near. There's a big nuclear plant there, by the way.
Yeah, it's Indian Point, I think.
Yeah. My point is that you'll tend to have a paranormal encounter like this. Oftentimes in a series, there'll be two or three of them, or a couple of coincidences and an encounter or something, to kind of bring your attention to something. And that's kind of how it works, and that kind of gets back to Lilly. I'm not going to go into Lilly yet, but okay. Lilly, John Lilly, I was reviewing some of his stuff and found out that he had a whole cosmology kind of built around this idea, and he even had a name for it called ECCO, ECCO. It was like a control system using synchronicity to inform and benefit mankind. And interestingly, Lilly also had a negative force that he realized at some point that was fighting the ECCO. It was called SSI, Solid State Intelligence. And he realized at some point that the SSI was human-based. And I think, in a way, that sort of means that he was figuring out that it was a mind control, perhaps, electromagnetic mind control system.
Okay. Because
he, too, was having strange things happen around 1974. One thing I wanted to mention about the Buddhist, the Geshe Kelsang thing with the Dalai Lama, they're having this fight or whatever, is that the Kelsang has decided to have all of his books, and he has like 30 or 40 books, and much more than the Dalai, the Dalai Lama is kind of soft and gooey. And Kelsang's really sharp, and his books are they lay out the doctrine and what you need to do if you want to reach enlightenment. He says, here it is, 1, 2, 3, 4, it lays it right out, straight from the ancient belief system. And he's having all of his books printed in China, which is a really big deal, because China has been fighting the Tibetans all along. And suddenly they're making a deal, and allowing Kelsang to publish in China. And he's going for it because he thinks he should. He thinks there's no reason to keep it, under wraps.
Right.
When it could benefit, billions of people in China. And again, it sort of highlights the schism of the CIA versus, the communists. The old Cold War thing playing itself out in modern, Buddhism. But one of the interesting things about the Buddhists, though, in terms of Kelsang specifically, is his church. And they have here in Seattle. This is another weird coincidence: is that the woman who worked for Lilly is in Kelsang's church. She's a priest in his church. And she told me that she feels like I was, and a lot of people that are in Kelsang's group were previously monks in Tibet that were killed by the Chinese in 1959. There was a big slaughter that went on, right? Thousands. And I was born that year, and she was telling me, and I don't know if this is true or not. I don't go around talking about reincarnation, but she was telling me that she felt like I had perhaps been a monk who had been killed, and there's a lot of, there's a whole belief in Buddhism that you can direct your consciousness after you die. If you work hard at honing your skills, you can literally, if you're good enough, decide who you're going to be born to. You can almost choose your parents beforehand. And this sounds crazy to us in the West, but over there, in the heart of these different sects, it's
common knowledge.
Considered common. And in fact, Kelsang supposedly chosen who he's going to be reincarnated, which couple in the group he's going to be reincarnated with after he dies.
Andrew, I tell
so
you that
this whole thing came up, but it relates to the Mothman in the sense that perhaps we had a lot of monks deciding to be reborn in certain parts of the country, and I asked her if that could be possible, and she said definitely. She said a lot of people in the community feel that was what happened to them. And there's one more point I wanted to make about it.
Okay.
Oh, that the globes of light that people see surrounding Mothman, surrounding Bigfoot. There's a lot of these globes of light. She says that these can be the spirits of dead people, and the more advanced the person was, or the more powers they had sort of developed through meditation, the brighter their light would be. And
all right. Well, so would that mean necessarily then that the big feet, plural, that people might be experiencing are past souls?
They might. What was that again?
All right. We think of Bigfoot and his like and Sasquatch and all that and Yetis, as I don't know, something detached from human beings. Is this scenario that you're laying out, according to whatever paradigm, is that these individuals might have been past souls? Am I right about that?
These individuals might have been what?
In other words, that the sightings that we see may have been manifestations of past human beings or whatever.
Well, she was talking about the lights.
Yeah, we'll follow through with that because I'm a little lost on that. Go ahead.
Well, it's kind of an old idea, and it's not just limited to Buddhists, though. But
that's okay.
The idea that some of these balls of light that seem intelligent, some of these lights actually will interact with you.
Okay.
And Keel, in fact, was doing that with his flashlight. That these are connected. These are energies that are connected to a person who's in transition between lives. Put it that way.
Okay.
And one good example is my niece Sharon, who, when she was born, she had a dream that she was flying into her mother's womb while her parents were copulating. Okay, and it was so vivid that it seemed real, and she noted a lot of details, and then she went to her mother and told her the details, and her mother burst into tears because that's exactly what was happening. The place, all the details.
The details.
So she had a vision of her birth, and it's a real thing. There's understanding the Buddhist way, the Buddhist worldview is difficult. I admit it takes a while, but once you get it, it does make a lot of sense in terms of seeing the body as an energy bundle. It's there's this consciousness that pervades the universe, and it coalesces in places and forms things. It forms trees, it forms rocks, water. It also forms the human body from those same constituent parts, and it animates those parts, because really everything is made up of the same basic
molecular structure,
substances.
Yeah. Let me interject at this time. You're listening to the Grassy Knoll on AM 1610 WBCX. You're also hearing us on the stream on PascoRadio.org and also on RemnantRadio.org. This is Biz. We have Andrew Colvin with us for our fifth segment, and his website is andycolvin.com, and on that website he has a 5-DVD series called Mothman's Photographer, and you can go to his website, like I said, andycolvin.com, just hit on films, and you can see that it's there. It's $39.99 for 5 DVDs. And also, Andy, you're in the process of writing a book about this whole situation, are you not?
Yes. In fact, I just finished laying it out today. It's a photo book with 300 images. Eye of the Garuda is the title. And it's off to the designer, computer guy. And it should be out in a couple of months.
Is this going to be? This has to be a little soft cover deal, isn't it? I mean, that's pretty extensive to have that many images in a book, is it not?
Yeah, it is. And we've got some help from a gallery in Cincinnati, the Cincinnati Conceptual Art Gallery. And yeah.
All right, and the other thing also...
And we're having a show here in Seattle, too, sponsored by Vidya, V-I-D-Y-A Gallery.
Okay.
And probably in November. It's going to be a big extravaganza with lots of screens showing documentary footage and all the photos, 300 photos.
All right, if people want to follow up on this with the story of the Mothman, and also so much of the other knowledge or information that you've imparted to us, which I think, of course, that's where the goal is to me. Can they follow that on your website? Will you keep updating that to indicate to people, especially if you write more articles or impart more information? Can they go there to find that on your website?
Yes. If you go to the website, actually we don't have a link for it yet, but I have a blog.
Okay.
If you just type in WordPress once you get there. We'll do that. Maybe that's the thing we forgot about talking about earlier, what we needed to put on that site, because it's still under construction. It's basically a photo site with lots of photos for sale, but yeah, we're going to have links to all those.
Well, we have plenty of time. Like we said, by the time that people hear this, you'll have that up and running, so that we say this will mean, it's nice, but by the time they hear this, you'll have it up.
Yeah, but the blog is an offshoot of the site, and it's going to be where I post things about the Mothman. The site is more for just photos. But also go to the new Mothman group on Yahoo if you're interested in talking about it more. Also, I think we're on the 6th episode here, not the 5th.
That would be
Am I right?
I don't know. I stopped counting.
I think we are.
You want to call 5 and call it 6, it's okay. We love it. It doesn't matter.
Well, let's blast ahead. I've got a couple more errata. We have time?
Yeah, sure. Go for it.
How much time do we have?
23 minutes.
Oh, okay. Believe it or not, someone predicted both the Manson family, after the murders, someone predicted who it was, and the same guy predicted the Silver Bridge collapse. Did you know that?
You might want
he did it on the radio.
Okay, tell me about this.
His name is Joseph DeLuise, DeLuise. He has a book called, what is the name of his book? Prophetic Mission, something like that.
This was a radio guy?
Well, he had a radio, he was a psychic who, it's called Psychic Mission. He was a radio psychic, and he was friends with Peter Hurkos, who a lot of people know. He's a famous psychic from the 50s and 60s. And DeLuise predicted a collapse of a bridge. He was seeing visions of it 2 weeks before. Talked about it in depth in the Christmas packages, I think, even. So he's one of the Mothman prophecy people, if you will. And he did it on the radio, and it's documented. And he even saw license plates of certain cars. But he also, after the Manson murders, he got a vision of Charles Watson. He knew it was a guy named Charles Watson, and he actually went to the Tate LaBianca home and got vibes from it. And I think there was this. The police acted very strangely in how they handled the whole deal. They didn't go after. It's almost like they knew it was Manson, but they were letting him out, letting him stay out for probably do some other things. He had a relationship with the police.
But Andrew, let me ask you this. I mean, as far as you can see, I'm not letting Manson off the hook. But I mean, as a kid, I was 17 or something like that when that whole thing happened. In fact, it happened on my birthday. And we were saying, well, they could not connect Manson, to any thrusting a knife into anybody. The whole thing seemed concocted. It was a strange situation. Do you agree with that whatsoever? I'm not discounting the fact that he was whack-a-ding-hoy.
Well, yeah, I think we talked about that before, and he was looking at the whole thing. It seems he was used, and in fact, Adam Gorightly, Gorigh.
We know Adam very well.
T-L-Y. Oh, you've had him on?
Oh, twice, yes.
Oh, really? Okay.
We're still recovering.
You've talked to. I haven't. I don't know. I've never heard him. So
Adam's a great guy. He really is.
I know he had a little bit in his book that I had written and didn't give me any credit, but I'm sure it was just one of those.
Yeah, we'll get on his case right away.
Yeah.
But go ahead. What was it that Adam had
well, I was just going to say that really about Deluise was that the interesting thing personally for me, connecting to me, is that his grandmother and my grandmother were from the same part of Italy, southern Italy, and he says that there are a lot of psychic women in that part of Italy, and this is very similar to this grandmother was on my dad's side. Well, my mother's side also is from, as I believe I mentioned before, Roane County, Jackson County.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, Harriet's mom was right across. They were about 5 miles from each other, but one was in one county and one was in the other county. But there are a lot of these women there who have, in West Virginia, who have these psychic powers.
Mm-hmm.
Moving along to another piece of information was getting back to Lilly for a moment. One of the things he discovered was that at a certain dose, he was experimenting with ketamine. It's a substance. I've never tried it, but it's a hallucinogen.
That's right. Yep. Mm-hmm.
And again, this Buddhist priest I know, she once was his assistant, and she did this stuff, and she told me all about how what happened and what it was like and everything. But Lilly found that if you took it at a certain dose, that you would hallucinate aliens. You would literally see the typical gray alien. And this is also paralleled in the work of Albert Budden, Budden. Well, actually, it's not his work. He's a UFO researcher who wrote a book about the electromagnetic part of the phenomenon, and I think it's called the electromagnetic indictment. Albert Budden. Mm-hmm. And he did a 12-year study in Britain, finding that when you get around magnetic sources like gravel pits and high-tension wires, satellite dishes, and so forth, that you tend to have a higher rate of paranormal experience among the people that live there, and also more unusual and more varied forms of entities. But he cited something in his book about research that was done with electromagnetic waves, that when the brain is hit with certain frequencies, it will hallucinate aliens as well in that way. So it's not just chemically, but electromagnetically. It's an electrochemical process by which the brain can hallucinate these visions.
Oh, by the way, also, Adam Gorightly also talked about, in some of his essays, about those who are using ketamine, for whatever purposes. So, you're right on the same track, no doubt.
Keel was, again, listening to some Keel tapes, and he starts in recent years. He started talking more about how the surveillance on him was done by the government. If you go and he talks about it in his book, in the Mothman book as well, but he doesn't make as definite a connection. But nowadays he sort of does, because more has come out on the fact that the government did tap people's phones and did harass UFO researchers. But one of the things that they were doing in West Virginia at the time was photographing houses and photographing children. So you'd be at home with your kids, and Man in Black would show up, and offer to take your kids' photos as part of a commercial service or whatever, and then never show up again and just take off and never come back.
Sayers Home Photos, huh?
And also chasing children too. So, but I think it still goes along with the idea that there could have been an Operation Chaos type program involved with harassing you and no one's really studied who the people, the backgrounds of the people that got involved in these. Were they union activists or not? Were they upsetting the status quo in some form to initiate these things?
Well, if that's the case, and you've mentioned this, and that's a really good point. Has anyone ever really talked to, and if they did they get anything out of any union organizers who felt that they were targeted and, for whatever reason, chose not to speak for obvious reasons.
Yeah, well, a lot of people disappeared completely, and Keel told me this, and he's also talked about it in different forums, different places. But there were people disappearing, a lot of teenagers, a lot of young people, and he says that a lot of them are connected to the Braxton County Monster, which is not to be. A lot of people confuse the Braxton County Monster, which was a Bigfoot-like creature, with the Flatwoods Monster, which was a robot alien type creature that's famous in West Virginia lore from 1952. And the Braxton County Monster kind of went all the way through from 52, even through the Mothman era.
All right, hold on.
Seeing a Bigfoot-like creature.
All right.
And in those areas, it seemed that people were disappearing. Teenagers were disappearing, and Keel said that the police were keeping it quiet.
All right.
And he also said that in some of the later UFO flaps, like in 73, 74, key year, also in 78, 79, that the police were being contacted by more men in black than they ever had been. So the men in black seemed to be going to police chiefs, in fact, and trying to coerce the police in some form or another.
Let me stop you right.
So it really could have been a government op, if you look at it from that point of view.
Well,
targeting police chiefs, maybe disappearing people who are troublesome.
Well, I'm definitely thinking from that point of view, but will you please go back in the time we had, because I really want to get this down. And that is that you were talking about two distinct, quote, monsters that were out there in that area. And what were they? What were they named?
Well, the first one was the Flatwoods Monster.
Okay.
And it occurred in 52, and there were a series of UFO sightings at the same time all over the eastern seaboard. One of the flight paths interestingly followed the same flight path as Flight 77. Came over West Virginia sort of in that same way. Landed, people saw a robot, people got sick, I think a dog died, it was big news.
All right, let me ask you right now, where did that flight land somewhere?
It landed in Flatwoods.
And where that would be?
Flatwoods, Kentucky, West Virginia, which is about 30 miles north of Charleston.
All right, now I'm going to pump you for a reason, that'll be obvious to me. Was that a strip that could handle a commercial airliner on a touchdown?
No, it just landed on a hilltop. But it was kind of on the Elk River, sort of. I think it's pretty close to the Elk River, yeah. And which is kind of where Mothman kind of started.
All right. So that you're telling me that landing strip could have handled a commercial aircraft landing?
No, there was no landing strip. It landed on a mountain. It just landed on a hill on a farm.
It just landed.
Yeah, it landed. People saw a craft land. They went up. There was this creature that floated out of it, and had red eyes.
Okay.
But it was like a robot kind of thing. And they found scrape marks the next day all over the ground. Well, I read there recently. Somebody's just written a book about it called the Braxton. Well, here he even confuses. This is what I'm saying, is that even the title of the book confuses it. He calls the book The Braxton County Monster. Subtitle: The Cover-Up of the Flatwoods Monster Revealed. And these are two different monsters.
Right? Okay. Now let me ask you this, in time we've got. All right, we got Flatwoods down, and the other character was where?
Well, one more thing about the Flatwoods.
All right, go ahead.
In this book, you find out that a guy who's working for that they sent up an army team from the intelligence division was there at that night in the woods. Okay, so, and then there were scrape marks everywhere, so they could have literally set this whole thing up, I think.
Okay.
But getting back to the other monster, the Braxton County Monster, was according to Keel, a Bigfoot-like creature that was seen all over eastern and central West Virginia, and even in Ohio. There's tons of them now, sightings. I mean, he basically thinks it's a Bigfoot.
Andrew, was that at a particular time, or was that across a period of time?
It was across a period of time.
All right, what are we looking at? A year, 2 years? I mean, Or 6 months?
According to Keel, it was all through the 50s and 60s. And the interesting thing is that we had an encounter. I twice had strange encounters in eastern West Virginia, where I was camping, and I in one case I saw it, and it was just some weird animal I'd never seen before. Probably wasn't a Bigfoot, but this other case, we were stalked all night in our tent by these screaming, sounded like a baby screaming, and there were several of them, and that's a common description of how a Bigfoot sounds. Okay. And we were huddled in our tent with a gun. And then a Bigfoot contactee told me, well, it's because you had a gun, that's why they were hassling you. Which I don't know what to think of that. But
I'd rather have the gun.
Yeah.
I'll take my chances.
But it's confusing, and I honestly haven't looked into trying to decipher it all so that I could effectively tell people, that's the Braxton County monster sighting. But the Flatwoods is definitely a one-time event. But people tend to lump that event in with all these other Bigfoot creature sightings and disappearances, and it gets very confusing. And I think it's purposeful in a way.
Well, I have no doubt. I mean, of course, that would serve their purposes. But of course, as we've talked, and as I can well understand, the goings on, and let's do this. We only got a couple of minutes left.
Well, here's a key thing I wanted to say, though.
All right, do it. Go ahead. No problem.
The virgin birth I talked about. It wasn't a birth. I don't want to make that clear. The person got pregnant without having sex, and then the fetus disappeared. Okay. Mm-hmm. That's a key little point I wanted to make clear. The other thing was we had some globs of jelly fall on our neighborhood on Woodward Drive, which is a Fortean common Fortean event. It's not common, but it's a rare event. But in the world of Fortean literature, it's a paranormal thing. So we had those globs falling in. We had some sonic booms that were really unusual, and we had the Black Panther sightings and the Bigfoot sightings, and on and on and on. We had it all going on in that neighborhood. Go ahead.
Well, to tell you the truth, I'm a little envious because that sounds like a really great neighborhood to live in. No. In the time we have left, that's what I wanted to do. As I'm looking around, let's see, we get about 5 minutes left. Boy, I tell you, we covered a lot of ground, and as you well know, and that's okay, we didn't necessarily lay some roadmap down. We just went where the information took us, and that's fine with me. I think that's great. Raw data is good. But if you were to sum up what we're looking at, when we talked through the last 5 shows, it's a little bit ominous to lay on you. But what are you looking at? Are we looking at some very strange behavior that takes place in the Ohio River Valley, most centrally around West Virginia and the states around it? I mean, is there something going on there? Was the X-Files necessarily not right? Or right, not wrong? Would you take that and run with that?
Well, you have different really key military facilities there. You have the Sugar Grove listening to people's phone calls. You have the DISC, Defense Industrial Police. NASA has their security base there in Ohio, southern Ohio, really close to Mothman country. You've got the key chemical plants and defense contractors. But I think, that's all separate from this ancient phenomenon that really is a real phenomenon that has spawned our greatest religions, and it has these creatures that, the Mothman, the Garuda, and the Thunderbird, they're all the same creature in my mind, and I think they're closely related to Bigfoot. And there are a whole host of paranormal phenomena, psychic phenomena that go along with them. And all through history, you've had humans who've been trying to tap into this phenomenon and understand it and learn from it. Some people benevolent, some not. And what you've got now is, at least according to Lavenda, who really lays it out pretty well, you've got an occult, an official sort of public-private financing of research into that phenomenon to harness it and to use it for really the wrong purposes. For military purposes or financial purposes. And when you look at whatever's going, if you're looking at a particular part of this, you have to try to figure out what you're looking at. Are you looking at the real phenomenon that's kind of neutral, that it inhabits the eighth tower, as Keel calls it? Is it neutral, ancient, and therefore beneficial use, or are you looking at the lower seven towers where people are trying to gain from it and use it to exploit others?
Well, I'll tell you what, this all began between you and me, with you inquiring about Lavenda, but I thought you had, and I still do think you had, a much better grip and a much better story to tell. Not that Peter doesn't, but we'll deal with Peter and his wandering bishops later on. However, what you brought to the surface, and I've not really given that much thought, and a lot of people haven't, about the Mothman Beyond, the movie that was probably, chintzy, as you said. But you brought to this situation a much more dynamic and realistic background that I think warrants, and I hope it does warrant, a lot of investigation and interest by our listeners. So, no matter how this goes, I'm not taking out the supernatural component, without a doubt. But, you've hit on a lot of things, and of course, that my bailiwick obviously is political, and given that, my vision is on West Virginia and the powers that be there, going back to the old robber barons. We only have a couple of minutes left, but if you will, by all means, Andrew, AndyColvin.com is his website. Andrew, give us your plugs and what's going on and what people can look forward to in the time to come on your website.
Well, we're going to have another book coming out, actually. We're going to take the transcripts from the 30-hour documentary, and we're going to transcribe those and build it into a readable story or a line that people can follow, and hope to have that out by the Mothman Festival, which is in September in West Virginia, September 17th. And also links to the blog, updates on things, links to the soundtrack. You can get the soundtrack to this documentary as well.
Of which we're going to hear.
Lots of UFO and mind control songs. It's kind of written from the point of view of a mind control doctor. We have lots of songs about characters.
Okay.
Each song is it's sung from the point of view of a different character in this whole scenario that we're talking about.
Well, I'm going to cut out with a song from your soundtrack, and that would be the automobile song.
That's a UFO song.
Yeah. Okay. And this is your work?
Yeah, that's us. Ivy League.